Well, a proposal is being put to the federal government today which suggests locking away some of a person's superannuation to fund their own aged care in the future. It's one of a series of ideas proposed by industry stakeholders at a summit in June after reports the country's aged care budget is expected to grow to $40 billion a year by 2026. It's the fourth biggest expense in the country. The paper argues higher taxes and greater consumer contributions will be needed to ensure services can be maintained. So, folks have got to chip in for their own aged care. Joining us live now, National Senator Matt Canavan. How do you feel about this, Matt?
I think this is a good idea because for most Australians, their superannuation might not be enough as it is. So I don't think there's this sort of pot of gold there to raid to fund the aged care deficit we're facing. Now, look, in saying that, we are facing a real challenge in funding aged care, and I don't dispute that some part of the solution to that would be or should be to require people who can pay or can afford to pay to make a contribution, just as we do with things like Medicare, with our school system. Often people who have more money don't do bulk billing or send their kids to a private school. And the fact that we don't do that to any great degree in aged care, I think, does contribute to the lack of funding we're seeing in the sector.
Yeah, I mean, one of the proposals put forward, Matt, that wealthy Australians would be dipping into their own private savings. I mean, would they not be doing that already?
Well, some are, but there are a lot of restrictions, Peter, on what aged care homes can charge. Unlike, as I say, your doctor's office, they can charge over the bulk billing rate, and often many do, of course, and then it's up to consumers to decide where they go. There's a lot of restrictions on aged care centres being able to charge above the deemed rates. Now, there's been a little bit more flexibility introduced post the Royal Commission into that, but I think that is one thing that does need to be looked at, as I say, because I don't see there being sufficient public funds to ensure that all Australians have adequate access to aged care. That's not happening at the moment as we rely on that system. So more of a mixed funding system as we have in other social services like education and primary care, I think makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So there's three prongs to it. It's the fact that the wealthy Australians can dip into their private savings. There is this new levy that's being touted as well, and also ring fencing super to fund their aged care. Your view is that
I don't think we should ring fence super. I don't think that's a starter. Yep.
And the levy.
Oh, look, I don't support individual levies. Obviously, we're probably going to require more public funding for aged care over time as the population ages, but I think a better way of doing that is through general revenue, through being efficient in other forms of government spending.
Yeah.
I mean, if we start with an aged care levy, we should probably need an NDIS levy, a defence levy. Where does it end? So I don't really support those additional levies, but of course, we're probably going to need more public funding too.
Yeah, and interesting, just on that point finally before we move on, I mean, funding, it's our fourth biggest expense, aged care, but it's only half the average of the OECD. So, I mean, there's work to do there, isn't there?
Well, look, we don't have as old a population as some other countries, but there's no doubt there is more need for funding in aged care. That's what I said earlier, that we have, in the coalition government, lifted the rates of funding for aged care homes. But there's going to be more challenges as people get older. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, let's go to Queensland, and the government is going to make it a little bit tougher, or maybe a lot tougher, for developers of wind farms to clear a higher threshold to secure licences. This is to placate the concerns of locals. Who's in the right here, Matt?
Well, I welcome these developments, but the devil's in the detail as always. There's not a lot of detail just yet, but wind farm developers have been getting away with blue murder in Queensland. There are multiple examples of massive amounts of pristine rainforest, subtropical bushland just being cleared without any concern for the natural environment. And of course, Peter, I'm not the world's biggest greedy, but we do need to protect our natural landscape. And the idea that we should save the planet by destroying our beautiful natural forests is ridiculous. But because some of these wind farm developers view themselves as messiahs, they think they can just walk roughshod over our landscape. So I do welcome these developments, but let's see what they actually mean in detail. The other thing that's really important is rehabilitation. Where do all these big blades and towers go? There are not sufficient requirements on the developers to make sure that they are responsible for their disposal at the end of their life as well.
Just while I've got you, in central Queensland, you got the reef right there. You had the OECD giving the current government a pass this week when it comes to its in danger status. So that'll be revisited again next year. But what did you make of that report this week?
I think we should end this fast. UNESCO is a complete joke. They don't come and visit our area in any great time. They really don't understand the reef. I've read their reports before. They're riddled with mistakes and misinterpretations of what actually happens. So I just don't have. I think we should end this charade every few years. We've apparently got to go cap in hand to the UN. About our own environmental assets. We should just get out of this organisation. It's run by tin pot dictatorships often. They get in charge of it, and it's just a complete joke.
Matt Canavan, we'll talk to you again next week.